Hello everyone, I'm back with another POE video, and I will be talking about the Harbinger Ascendancy. Now, I'm going to be honest, I will not be league starting this one, and I don't think it's that interesting. There are a few archetypes here, but I think it kind of is, it underperforms compared to other Ascendancies, but I will break it down and explain what things it can do well and try to explain why I have the current feelings I do about it. First of all, the Harbinger of Arcane is the worst Ascendancy notable that I have seen on any Ascendancy so far. We're going to forget this exists, burn it, burn it with a passion, and the reason being is if you will look here, this is a good one. This is this is Harbinger of the Arcane. Essentially, it's a buff that doesn't have 100% uptime, and it's giving us 10% increased cast speed and 30% increased mana regeneration rate. It also gives you damage penetrates 10% lightning resistance and 15% chance to shock. That's not that great. I would rather have a high-level Arcane Surge support that I can scale on the tree than I would have Harbinger of the Arcane. So there are notables on the tree that I think are stronger than this Ascendancy notable. This is very, very bad. So we might as well talk about the other Harbingers while I'm on this tangent. Harbinger of Time is actually pretty decent. What it gives us is 10% increased action speed, and it will also stack additively with other animation speed modifiers, which you can use with a few other mechanics to give you more action speed. But 10% action speed's nothing to scoff at. It's not amazing. It's worse than Deadeye Tailwind on average, but it's something, right? And then we have 20% damage reduction and immunity to curses and stun immunity and immunity to status ailments. So this one's very solid. This is the Harbinger of Focus. It's probably the strongest one, and we can talk about how you can incorporate this into a build and talk about what the general design of the Ascendancy was. So whoever designed this Ascendancy, one of the archetypes I think they plan for is that you go the 40% increased cooldown recovery rate to lower the cooldown of these Harbinger skills, right? Because it should this should increase your uptime on the buffs. By default, they all have 50% uptime. If you grab this 40% increased cooldown recovery rate, right? And then you also grab this, buffs on you expire 30% slower, you should have close to, if not 100% uptime with Harbingers, these Harbinger buffs. So what you can then do is you can then grab the Harbinger of Time and the Harbinger of Focus. So this is an archetype right here. It's our first archetype is you do a full-on Harbinger build. You have your two Harbinger bros following you around. You have that increased cooldown recovery rate, and you have the defenses there. So that's, if I was going to league start something, that's the easiest thing to league start probably for this Ascendancy, because it gives you, like, the power is instant. You know, you instantly get these buffs. You don't need gear. You don't need anything else. I think I think there's better options, and we'll get to those Ascendancies later, but hey, it's an option if you're really into the buff playstyle, that works. It's also worth noting that this will cause adrenaline from something like Death's Rush to expire slower, so you can have better uptime on adrenaline, and it also will apply to temporary auras. So if you can get a Guardian Blessing aura or something going, then you'll benefit from that. So that's not that bad. Here we have immunity to curses while channeling. So this is another archetype. You grab this Ascendancy notable and you grab this one, and this is for your cast on build. So cast on channeling, cast on crit with Cyclone, etc. You can use those two things together, and you can be immune to curses, chill shock, and all that stuff while channeling, and then you do a cast while build. It's not a bad idea. I'm not personally, I don't play trigger builds, but if you do, I'm sure it will be strong. Trigger builds are always strong, but they're not something I personally enjoy, so I'm not going to talk about them, but that archetype is present here. I will say that 40% increased cooldown recovery rate is very big if you're a trigger-based build. It's extremely impactful because there's not a lot of sources of that. It's just like a belt mod and a few other miscellaneous mods here and there, but so any source you can get of that is going to be a pretty big increase to your damage. Lastly, we have this 100% increased area effective hex skills, and Temporal Chains has no reservation if cast with an aura. This is a third archetype, so this was the second one. If you do these two together, you can do Self-Curse. And what Self-Curse is it's where you put Temporal Chains on yourself, and what that will do is it will prolong the duration of all buffs and debuffs on you, so you can use something like a Soul Tether Belt, which will give you, or is it called Soul Tether or Soul Drinker? 1 second. It's Soul Tether. So what this, no, this is not the one I'm thinking of. What's the name of the buff I'm thinking of? The thing I'm using has reduced flash duration on it. Soul Thirst. My apologies. It allows you to gain Soul Eater during any flask effect. So you go Temp Chains, you go the increased buff duration. Won't really apply to this, but you could go it anyway. It's thematic. And you try to get a flash duration as long as possible, and this will give you the Soul Eater buff until the flask runs out. You can get upwards of a minute duration. The issue with doing that archetype here is that you're going to have to avoid all sources of immune to curses like the Plague, because if you're not affected by Temporal Chains, then it's not going to get the beneficial effect of Temporal Chains. So, yeah. You could also theoretically use this for like a Hex Blast build, but I personally don't see it. Once again, I think this ascendancy is a little bit weak. If I played it, though, I would be playing this one, where you grab these three notables. And then lastly, we have this one. And I think this node is kind of an example of, like, this feels a little bit undercooked. 30%, if it's 30% more energy shield recovery rate and 30% more mana recovery rate, then I would say this was a pretty strong node. But when it's increased like this, maybe I just don't properly understand how hard it is to get increased energy shield recovery rate, but from what I see on the tree, it doesn't look that bad. So I personally think this is another cross out node that you never run. So that's pretty much the general ideas behind this. This ascendancy, you grab things that normally would have they don't have good uptime. Like, these buffs don't normally have good uptime, and you give them good uptime by using buffs last longer and increase cooldown recovery rate. And you either go a trigger build or you go a buff stacking build. Then you play from there. You have some nice immunities. It's not like there's nothing you get out of it. 20% DR with curse immunity. Like, once again, if Harbinger Focus is probably the strongest node on this tree, it's decent, but I don't want to oversell it here. I'm not touching this, and if this doesn't sound enjoyable to you, I wouldn't touch it either.